Hi, welcome to my video on factoring the difference of two squares. Let's work these products out, and we're going to work them out by, I'm going to do it two ways, but let's do it by FOIL. First, x times x, outside, negative x, inside, positive x, and last is -1. And when I add these up, that cancels out to give me a 0, so that's -1. And outside is x squared, inside is -2x. Sorry, first outside, inside, last. And when we add these up, we get a 0, so we get x squared minus 4. FOIL. First, outside, inside, last, and again, they give me 0 when I add. First, x squared, outside, -3, inside, +3x, and last, -9, and they cancel. They give me a 0. So notice they're adding up to 0. So notice there's no x in any of these. And if you multiply these, you get a times a, which is a squared. A times -b, -ab. B times a is the same as a times b. Remember, 2 times 3 is 6, and 3 times 2 is 6. So a times b is the same as b times a. And b times -b is a -b squared. And those two terms cancel out, so I get an a squared minus b squared. Same thing with f. I have x times x is x squared. X times -y, -xy. Y times x is a positive xy. I could have yx, but I'll keep them the same because they're... And last is the -y squared. And the middle terms cancels out because they're plus minus. So notice all of these, all the middle terms. There was no middle term. There was only the first and the last because the middle term became a 0. Notice that the two terms, binomials, are the same terms except plus minus. In that case, you can see that the middle term is canceling out. And that happens with all of these. That's an x and an x, the 3 and a 3 with a plus minus, so the middle term canceled out to give you 0. Each of the above, the product is what we call, the product is the difference of two squares. Notice difference. Difference means subtract. So notice you have x squared minus 1, x squared minus 4. That's the difference of two squares. When we say squares, because that's an x squared minus 2 squared. That's x squared minus 1 squared. This is x squared minus 25 is 5 squared. X squared minus 9 is an x squared minus 3 squared. So it's the subtraction of two squares. Subtraction of two squares. A squared minus b squared. X squared minus y squared. So it's the difference of two squares. The middle term of the product is 0 times the variable, becoming a 0x or a 0. Notice the middle term is a 0. Hence, the middle term is a sum of 0. So the middle term has a sum of 0. Notice when we're multiplying, when we multiply the last terms, that number on the end that's a product, but we don't have a middle term. Middle term is missing, so that means the sum is 0. It's like if I give you x squared plus 3x plus 2, the product is 2, the sum is 3. So, but when I have an x squared minus 25, that means the product is still the number on the end, -25, but the sum is not there, so the sum is a 0, because this binomial, it can be written as 0x minus 25. 0x means it's not written in, but its descending order has an x squared, an x, and a constant. So there's no x there. So that means there's a zero coefficient for the x. That means your sum is zero. Difference of two squares. You'll see it over and over and over. Very easy to recognize. Use the pattern of a plus b times a minus b, which equals x squared minus bx. So when I multiply these two, I have the same terms, first terms, same last terms. When I multiply these, I'll get an a squared, I'll get a b squared with a minus in the middle. So the product of these two binomials is a squared minus b squared, the difference of two squares. So in that case, if you multiply these, you can get 3x squared minus the 10 squared. And that gives you 9x squared minus 100. Because the outside is a negative 30x, the inside is a plus 30x, and they cancel to give you 0. So if you notice, they're the same terms. First term, same. Last term, the same. With a plus minus, you can square 3x, square the 10, and put a minus between them, and you'll have the difference of two squares, because the outside, inside cancels out when you add. The sum is 0. B, you square the y, you square the 4, and put a minus in the middle. And that gives you y squared minus 16. So if you did the FOIL, you would get negative 4y for the outside. The inside is a plus 4y. So when you add them up, what do you get? 0. So first terms gives you y squared. The last terms gives you negative 16. They cancel out, so you get y squared minus 16. The difference of two squares. Let's do some practice. Practice means pause the video and work these out. When you get them done, press play to see if you're right. Express each as the difference of two squares. So that could be an x squared minus a 9 squared, which simplifies to x squared minus 81. Because they're the same, first terms and last terms, square each and put a minus sign between them. And that you get x squared minus 81. And that's same thing. Two binomials the same except plus minus. So x is being squared and the 6 is being squared with a minus sign. So that's x squared minus 36. You could do FOIL, and they are, the two of these, x squared minus 36 is the difference of two squares, because it's x squared minus 6 squared. And this one is 2x is being squared minus the 7 being squared. So that's 4x squared minus 49. So 4x squared comes from 2x being squared. 49 comes from 7 being squared. So that's what we call the difference of two squares. So we're going to work backwards now in a minute. You'll see what I'm talking about. Number 4. That's an x being squared and an 8 being squared. So that's x squared minus 64. So there are the difference of two squares. Notice the same terms, first terms, same last terms. So you squared x, you square 8, and put a minus between them. Difference of two squares. Now we have we have some more practice here, and then we have some, I'm going to do these 4, you can do these 4. Then I'll do these 4, and you'll do these 4. So let me work these out. Or you can pause these right now and work out the answers and press play to see if you're okay. You can do all these yourself to see how you're going to do them. Factor each completely. So watch this. This is the difference of two squares. So if we go to factor these, we go x, we factor. There's no GCF, so we do double brackets. So this is an x and an x to get x squared. Factors of 1 are 1 and 1. Because the product is negative 1, I'm going to have a plus minus guaranteed. Remember, this is an x squared plus a 0x minus 1. There's no x, so that's a 0x. So that means that's your product, negative 1, and your sum is 0. So what two numbers do you multiply to give you a negative 1 and add to give you 0? They have to be plus and minus each other. They cancel out. So we're working in reverse now. Again, this is the difference of two squares. Think about it. That's x squared minus 5 squared. If that be the case, then this is an x and an x to give you x squared. The product is on the end, negative 25, so there's a plus and a minus. And there's no x, so that means these two numbers have to be the same numbers. Because when they add these two, you get 0. Again, x squared plus 0x minus 25. The middle term is a 0x. It's not there. So the sum is 0. So you add up the two numbers on the end, the last terms, they get a 0. And they got to be 5 and negative 5. 49x squared is double bracket, no GCF. So it's a 3x and a 3x. Difference of two squares. Why? Because that's a 3x squared minus a 7 squared. Difference, subtraction of these two squares. So the 3x, 7, 7 plus minus. Difference of two squares. This one right here is x squared and 10 squared. Difference of two squares. Oh yes, x squared is x and x. 100 is 10 and 10, and it's a plus and a minus. Why? Because there's no middle term of x. So that means when you add these two terms, which is your sum, you get 0. When you multiply, you get a negative 100. So factor these four now. Let's see what you're going to do. And we're going to factor completely. So double bracket, we get x and x. We have a product is negative 4, so it's a plus and a minus. No middle terms, so the two factors got to be the same, 2 and 2. Difference of two squares. Remember, that's x squared, subtract 2 squared. So it's x and 2 with a plus minus. 25x squared is a 5x being squared and 1 being squared. So that's the difference of two squares, 5x, 1 plus minus. The product is negative 1. So if you multiply those two numbers, you get negative 1. When you do outside and the inside and add them together, you get a 0. Notice the sum is 0. Same terms in each one with a plus minus. And right here we have difference of two squares. That's a 4x and a 4x to give you 16x squared. To get 9, you get 3 and 3. And the product is negative, so it has to be a plus and a minus. No x in the middle term, so that means you have the same terms with a plus minus. The outside inside adds up to give you 0. And this one, x squared is x and x. Got to be that to get x squared. And product is negative 81, so it's got to be a plus and a minus. And there's no middle term because it's a 0, so that means it's got to be 9 and 9. Perfect. Difference of two squares. You'll see it over and over and over. Now, right in this set down here, I've made the math the factoring a little bit rougher, but we just got to obey. When we factor, we got to remember to do descending order. So we got to go 9x squared minus 25x, because the x squared comes first, and this is a constant that goes last. Now when you change the order, you don't change the sign. Notice you got the difference of two squares. So there's no GCF here. You can't take a 9 out or a 25 out. So that's a 3x and a 3x. And 25 is 5 and 5. And because it's a minus product, it has to be a plus and a minus. Difference of two squares. But it got to be in descending order. X is x squared, x constant. This one is in descending order. X squared and a constant. Notice there's 0x is understood to be in the middle. But we have to remember, it's in descending order. Well, the first rule in factoring, GCF. Take the GCF out. So there's a GCF of 5. 5 into 5x squared is x squared. 5 divided into negative 45 is a negative 9. So the GCF is 5 is out. Now we have that looks like two terms. That looks like the difference of two squares. So we got a double bracket. To get x squared, we got x and x. To get a negative, we got a plus and a minus. So notice there's no x, 0x, 0x. So that means these two numbers are the same, 3 and 3. So that's what we call factored completely. We move the GCF first, and then factor what's left. Every time it works. Especially if you take out a GCF. When you take out a GCF, put it outside, make sure you check this to see if it's factorable. And the only way that's factorable is two brackets. Check it out. Don't forget descending order. Descending order, 3 and a 1, okay. Now I need to take out, I don't want a negative in my leading term. 2 is a common factor of 800, so 2 is a GCF of 2 and 800. And I have an x cubed and an x, so we take out the smallest exponent of x, 1. Negative 2x cubed divided by negative 2x is x squared. 3, subtract 1 is 2, or that's a 1, and that's a 2, adds up to give you 3. I have an 800, so when I divide, I get a negative. I had a plus there. That's a negative 400. Negative 400. And I don't need an x because I already have one. So negative 2x times a negative 400 is a positive 800. When you take out a negative, this becomes a positive, right? And that becomes a negative. Dividing a negative into these changes the sign. Now, the GCF is out, and it looks like we got difference of 2 squares, because that's 20 squared. That's x squared. So that's an x and an x. Product is negative, so it's a plus and a minus. So what two numbers multiply to give you 400, 20, and 20? Difference of 2 squares. D, well, when we got double variables like that, 2 variables, we don't worry about descending order. So the GCF is 7, so we take a 7 out. 7 divided into 7x squared is x squared. 7 divided into negative 7y squared is negative y squared. 7 is out, and again, we have the difference of x squared, y squared. So that's an x and an x, y and a y. First terms you multiply give you this one. The last terms you multiply give you that one. And the product is a negative, so it's a plus and a minus, the difference of 2 squares. So practice. You could have done practice on all these. Now, pause the video, and here's the questions. Work each of these out. See if you're going to get the final factoring right. Is it in descending order? Yes. 10 is the GCF. Take it out. 10 divided into 10x squared is x squared. 10 divided into negative 10 is negative 1. So we have a 10. Can we factor this? Yes, because it's the difference of 2 squares. X squared is x and x. 1 is got to be 1 and 1. And there's a minus 1 on the end, so it's got to be a plus and a minus. Perfect. Now, descending order. That's a 3 and that's a 5. Oh, we got to go descending order. 5 first, and the x cubed second. When we move these around, we do not change the signs. Now we have to take a negative out because the leading term should not be negative. The leading term should always be positive, as in, that's a positive. And the leading term right here is positive x squared. So when we factor, we need a positive leading term. So take the negative out. And we take an x out because x is in each term. But the smallest exponent is 3. So take the x cubed out. So negative x5 divided by negative x cubed is x squared. 3 plus 2 is 5. We subtract, or we can add these. Same thing. Positive divided by negative is a negative. And 49, right? And the x cubes cancel. I do not need any more x's here because I already have 3 of them to go with that. So if I divide, the x cubes cancel. So my GCF is there, negative x cubed, and I'm going to factor this possible factor because I got an x squared. X squared is x and x. Product is negative, so I got a plus and a minus. And notice there's no x in the middle, so these two numbers got to be the same. Square root of 49 is 7. 7 sevens. Perfect. Descending order perfect is x squared and constant. We take the negative 6 out. We always want the leading term to be positive. Negative 6x squared divided by negative 6, x squared. I want this to be a positive number. Perfect. 24 divided by negative 6 is a negative 4. Done. Check back that. Negative 6 times negative 24, right. And we have x squared minus 4. That's different. 4 is 2 squared. So that's the difference of 2 squares. So it's x and x. Product is negative, so it's got to be a plus and a minus. And there's no middle term. Why? Just to remind you, that's a 0x in the middle. It's not there. Descending order is x squared, x, and a constant, but there's no x. So that means that's a 0. That means your sum is 0. Sum is 0. So that means these two numbers are going to be the same, of 2 and 2. Square root of 4 is 2. 2 and 2. Done. Always keep thinking. Always keep reviewing. And we don't worry about descending order in terms of two variables. So we take the 10 out because it's a common factor, and we have a y. 10 and y are common. So 10x squared y divided by 10y, we just get an x squared. 90 divided by 10, negative 90 divided by 10 is negative 9, and the y's cancel. Y, I have a y here. I don't need any more y's here, because 10y times negative 9 will give you negative 90y. That's the GCF. And again, we have the difference of two squares. Why? Because that's an x squared minus 3 squared. 9 is 3 squared. The difference is subtraction of two squares. If you do, you can put x in both brackets. You can put 3 in both brackets with a plus minus. Why plus minus? Because the product is negative. The difference of two squares is the same terms in each bracket with a plus minus. So that takes us through talking about the difference of two squares, factoring the difference of two squares. Keep it in mind. You'll use it over and over and over in all the math that you do, all the algebra, even up to the calculus. Difference of two squares will come into play. Everywhere. Important to learn, important to recognize. If you like what I'm doing, click the like button. And if you'd like to subscribe to my channel, click the subscribe button. And the notification bell will be good to click if you're a subscriber, because there's many more videos coming. Many more videos explaining one step at a time, which is important. Understand one step at a time. Makes it easier. Write a comment on my video if you're a subscriber. Visit my math website, www.mathfullyexplained.com. And you have 3 sections: me, degrees and teaching experience. Videos tells you about the teaching strategies you're going to use to help you learn your math. And the content has the topics and the number of videos. That's going to be on my YouTube channel. Black font is what's there right now. And the red font is what will be developed in the near future. Thank you very much for viewing. Bye-bye.